Flight 447, the night the sky fell silent. Location Atlantic Ocean, approximately 570 miles off the coast of Brazil. Date June 1st, 2009. Time 0240 UTC. The air traffic control tower in Recife, Brazil, hummed with the quiet efficiency of a late night shift. Controllers monitored their screens, tracking dozens of aircraft crossing the vast darkness of the Atlantic. Among them was Air France Flight 447, a routine red-eye from Rio de Janeiro to Paris. Routine. That word would haunt investigators for years to come. The crew. Ordinary heroes. Captain Marc Dubois, 58 years old, sat in the cockpit that night with the confidence of a man who had conquered the skies 10,988 times. 10,988 flight hours. Think about that. Nearly 458 days of his life spent in the air. Marc was a devoted family man, a father of two daughters who waited for him in Paris. His colleagues described him as meticulous, calm under pressure, a pilot's pilot. He had celebrated his birthday just 3 weeks earlier, blowing out candles with his wife of 32 years, Marie Claire, never knowing that this flight would be his last. First Officer Pierre-Cédric Bonin, 32, was the youngest in the cockpit. Young? Yes. But inexperienced? Absolutely not. With 2,936 flight hours under his belt, Pierre was ambitious, energetic, eager to prove himself. He had recently gotten engaged to his childhood sweetheart, Leia. They were planning a wedding in Provence that September. Pierre kept a small photograph tucked in his flight bag, Leia laughing in a sunflower field. Would she ever see him again? First Officer David Robert, 37, was the technical expert of the trio. With 6,547 flight hours, David was known for his analytical mind, his ability to troubleshoot complex systems. He had two sons, ages 8 and 5, who thought their papa was a superhero because he flew giant planes across the ocean. David had promised to take them to Disneyland that summer. That promise would never be kept. The cabin crew of 9 flight attendants served 216 passengers that night. 216 souls. Families returning from vacation, business travelers heading to meetings, young couples beginning adventures. Among them was a group of 61 doctors and medical professionals heading to a convention in Paris. Healers. People who saved lives. Could they save their own? The storm approaches. Captain Dubois stood up from his seat, stretching his arms. Gentlemen, I'm going to take my rest period now. The weather looks manageable, but keep an eye on those convective cells ahead. No problem, Captain, Pierre replied, sliding into the left seat. We've got this. David nodded, his eyes scanning the instruments. The Airbus A330 was performing beautifully, cruising at 35,000 feet, slicing through the night at 840 kilometers per hour. Everything was normal. Everything was perfect. Or was it? Ahead of them, invisible in the darkness, a massive system of thunderstorms churned across the intertropical convergence zone. The radar showed red and yellow blotches. Dangerous weather. But pilots crossed the Atlantic every night. This was nothing new, right? The first whisper of doom. The autopilot was handling the aircraft smoothly. Pierre and David chatted casually about their families, their plans for their layover in Paris. The mundane conversations of ordinary men doing an extraordinary job. Then, without warning, the pitot tubes, the aircraft's critical airspeed sensors, began to ice over. Ice. Such a simple thing, frozen water, and yet it would trigger a catastrophe beyond imagination. TCAS alert. The traffic collision avoidance system suddenly announced, "Traffic! Traffic! What? There's no one near us." David's voice carried confusion. The ice was already creating phantom readings. And you'd see descent into chaos. The autopilot disconnected. Clack! The sound every pilot dreads. "I have the controls," Pierre announced, his hands gripping the side stick. But something was terribly wrong. The airspeed indicators were showing conflicting information. 274 knots? 285 knots? Which one was real? How fast were they actually flying? Did they know? Could they know? "Watch your speed," David warned, his eyes darting between instruments. Pierre, faced with contradictory data, made a fateful decision. He pulled back on the side stick. The nose lifted. The massive Airbus began to climb. But why? Why would an experienced pilot climb when he was already at cruise altitude? The stall warning erupted. "Stall! Stall! Stall!" But here's the cruel irony. The stall warning was designed to silence itself when the computer thought the airspeed was too low to be valid. So as the aircraft actually began to stall, losing lift, falling from the sky, the warning stopped. Silence. Deadly, misleading silence. Yo 211 UTC. The battle begins. What's happening? What's going on? Pierre's voice climbed in pitch. The panic was setting in. David Robert, the analytical one, tried to make sense of the chaos. Your speed, you're climbing, descend. But Pierre, overwhelmed, confused, continued to pull back. The nose pointed up, higher, higher. The aircraft's speed was bleeding away. They were now in a deep aerodynamic stall. A commercial airliner, falling through the sky at thousands of feet per minute, and yet the nose was pointed upward. How could this be? How could trained pilots not recognize a stall? In the passenger cabin, people were screaming. The aircraft shuddered and shook. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. Children cried for their parents. Did they understand what was happening? Did they have time to pray? Desperation. Captain Dubois, hearing the commotion, rushed back to the cockpit. He had been resting for only 10 minutes. 10 minutes! If he had stayed at the controls, would things have been different? Would 228 people still be alive? What are you doing? Marc shouted as he entered the cockpit. I don't know what's happening. We've lost control. Pierre cried out. No, no, no. David was frantically trying to help. Descend! Put the nose down! But the confusion was total. In the Airbus sidestick system, the pilot's control inputs were not coordinated. Pierre was pulling back on his stick while David had briefly pushed forward on his. The aircraft was receiving conflicting commands. Which way should it go? Up? Down? Marc squeezed into the jump seat behind them. What's your altitude? What's your speed? The instruments were a confusing mess of warnings, alerts, conflicting data. The aircraft was falling at 11,000 feet per minute, falling like a stone, but they couldn't see it clearly in the chaos. 02 UTC, the final moments. Climb, 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 Pierre shouted, still pulling back. No, no, don't climb. David screamed. Did they understand? Could they understand? The aircraft was stalled. The laws of physics are unforgiving. Without airspeed over the wings, there is no lift. The nose must go down to recover. Down. Not up. Marc Dubois suddenly understood. Put the nose down. Push forward. Push! But it was too late. Too late. The aircraft was at 10,000 feet. The dark waters of the Atlantic rushed up to meet them. At 2:14:28 UTC, First Officer Robert spoke his final words. Damn it! We're going to crash. This can't be happening. Pierre-Cédric Bonin, the young man who would never marry his Leia, kept the side stick pulled back until the very end. Did he freeze? Was he in shock? We'll never know. Impact. The Airbus A330, traveling at nearly 200 kilometers per hour, struck the Atlantic Ocean with the force of hitting concrete. The aircraft disintegrated instantly. Wings torn away, fuselage shattered, 228 souls extinguished in a fraction of a second. The radar track disappeared from the screens in Recife and Dakar. Air France Flight 447 was gone. Gone, swallowed by the darkness of the Atlantic. The aftermath. A world in shock. It took 5 days to find the first bodies floating in the ocean. It took 2 years to locate the wreckage on the seafloor, 12,800 feet below the surface. 2 years. Can you imagine the agony of the families, waiting, hoping, never receiving closure? When investigators finally recovered the flight recorders, the truth emerged. The truth that crushed the hearts of everyone who heard it. The aircraft had not suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure. The engines were running. The flight controls were functioning. The aircraft was capable of flying. It could have survived. But the combination of iced pitot tubes, confusing warnings, inadequate training, and human error had created a perfect storm of tragedy. Pierre-Cédric Bonin had held the side stick in the pullback position for nearly the entire descent. Nearly 4 minutes. 4 minutes of fighting the wrong battle. And the other pilots, in the chaos and confusion, never fully realized what he was doing until those final seconds. Captain Dubois, with his 10,988 hours of experience, had returned to the cockpit too late. Just minutes too late. The human cost. Marie-Claire Dubois lost her husband of 32 years. She would tell investigators that Marc loved flying more than anything except his family. He died doing what he loved, she said through tears. But what comfort is that when you sleep in an empty bed? Leia never married. The sunflower photograph from Pierre's flight bag was returned to her, water damaged but recognizable. She keeps it on her mantle to this day. David Roberts' sons asked their mother for years, "When is Papa coming home?" How do you explain to an 8-year-old that his superhero father fell from the sky? The 61 doctors and medical professionals never made it to their convention. Healers who couldn't heal themselves. 216 passengers, 12 crew members, 228 lives, each one a universe of hopes, dreams, fears, and love, all extinguished in 4 minutes of confusion and tragedy. The lessons. The crash of Air France 447 led to sweeping changes in aviation, new training protocols for manual flying, improved pitot tube designs, better stall warning systems, changes in how pilots are taught to recognize and recover from unusual attitudes. But can these improvements bring back the dead? Can they comfort the families left behind? Captain Marc Dubois, First Officer Pierre-Cédric Bonin, and First Officer David Robert were not negligent criminals. They were ordinary men thrust into an extraordinary situation. They fought, they struggled, they tried. But in the end, the sky claimed them, the Atlantic swallowed them, and the world mourned. Let's remember together. This tragedy shook the aviation world and devastated hundreds of families, but we must remember them. We must honor their memory by learning from their sacrifice. Like this video if this story touched your heart. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss stories of courage, tragedy, and human drama. Comment below. Have you ever experienced a flight emergency? Share your story. Did you know anyone who flies for a living? How does this story make you feel about their profession? What do you think went wrong? Could this tragedy have been prevented? How would you react in a situation like this? Could you stay calm? Share this video. Let's spread awareness about aviation safety. Every share honors the memory of those 228 souls. Questions for discussion. Should there be stricter training requirements for commercial pilots? How much responsibility falls on the manufacturers versus the pilots? What would you want your last words to be if you knew your time was ending? Drop a heart emoji if you're grateful for every pilot who brings you safely home. Tag someone who works in aviation. Let them know we appreciate them. Friends, life is precious. Every flight, every journey, every moment. Hug your loved ones. Tell them you love them. Because captains like Marc Dubois, young dreamers like Pierre Bonin, and dedicated professionals like David Robert taught us that tomorrow is never guaranteed. Never forget Flight 4447. See you in the next video, where we'll continue to honor those who gave everything in the pursuit of bringing us safely across the skies.